Hey everyone, and welcome to In the Running, a podcast where we bring your local elections to life.
We're your hosts, Mae and Olivia, two juniors at Mountain Brook High School.
We started this podcast to help inform voters on who is running in their local elections and what those candidates do on a citywide scale.
So, we're asking the real questions about their goals, values, and what they want to do for your communities across Alabama. This is In the Running. Hello everyone, and welcome back to In the Running. We're your hosts, Mae Dapkus.
And I'm Olivia Self, and today we're here with Jacob Bouma-Sims, running to represent District 6, Alabama's District 6 in the U.S. House of Representatives. Thanks for being with us today.
No problem. Yeah, and I'd also like to congratulate y'all on getting this formula right so early, because Ian, my friend from college, who was the best man at my first wedding, we also have a similar show called Critical Dispatch 6. And the thing was, that wasn't our first podcast. First, we had a podcast about nothing, basically. Literally, there was one time we were doing a Facebook live stream when I was hitting him in the face with a bag of jet puffed marshmallows. Then we had a show about medieval and Renaissance true crime. I guess that was but it was very niche.
Yeah.
Then recently this year we decided to start doing a podcast about politics in Central Alabama, where it turns out we've interviewed some of the same people.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
And I like that little spiel about you being a podcaster. Do you have anything else that you want to share about yourself outside of your campaign?
Yeah, so I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I became a believer and was baptized when I was in college. I go to Iron City Church. Before I am a representative of District 6 or representative of my family, I think of myself as a representative of the kingdom of God. And that's part of why things like religion, freedom of religion are so important to me, because I think Jesus wants us to live peaceably amongst each other and show our way through love. I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD at young ages. That makes me the first openly autistic candidate for major office in Alabama history.
Really?
That's part of why I use the butterfly in some of my campaign stuff. Why I like the butterfly, because it's a symbol both of autism acceptance and of migrant rights. I am a big reader and writer. My mom made sure that we lived near the library when I was growing up. And I write poetry and sometimes perform it. One of the results when you look up my last name, I think you'll still find my Patreon, and I have an online Christian bookstore called Diakonos Books. And so, yeah, those are some things about me. Another reason that one of my performance names, besides the dash in my last name, one of the reasons that my performance name is Dash is because I was a cross-country runner in high school. I was so hyperactive. I just liked running. People couldn't have asked me how far my records were or anything, because I just liked running. I was happy to just stay in the middle.
Well, that's perfect for the pod name, In the Running.
Yeah.
Look at that. Very cool variety of interests. Mm-hmm. Well, we want to know about your political career. What inspired you to run to represent District 6?
Yeah, so my parents worked in the media, and my mom, very intelligent woman, has a Ivy League degree, and so I was taught about politics and how to sort these things out at a very young age. I was in gifted program at one point, and so I was ahead of the curve on knowing things about politics. I've lived in this district the vast majority of my life. The only real exceptions are when the only real exception is the 10-month service year I did after college in New Haven, Connecticut, which helped inform some of my views on things like energy policy and, poverty, because I worked with a community action agency, which helps people get nonprofit and government assistance. But yeah, I know this district very well. I've lived in Homewood. I've lived in Hoover. I went to school in Montevallo. I work in this district. My family lives here. And honestly, as a cashier, how I'm supposed to approach problems when I hear about them or see them is come with solutions. And no offense to any particular activists or politicians, but a lot of times lately when it comes to the madness and grift of the Trump administration, when it comes to climate change, when it comes to voting rights, when it comes to Alabama power, I hear a lot of talk. I hear a lot of problems. I don't necessarily hear a lot of solutions. So I wanted to jump into the next special election and push the conversation forward.
Great. That kind of leads into our next question. If elected, what would be your top 3 measurable goals or solutions during your term?
So, lower utility bills. You may wonder, what does that have to do with the federal government? Well, and there is precedent for this in the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is not perfect, but the Tennessee Valley Authority has statistically lower prices and better service than Alabama Power because it's not based on profit the same way. Alabama Power is a monopoly that's owned by an out-of-state company, and we've tried time and time again to reform it, or at least the people have, and it hasn't really worked out. I want to create a federally owned alternative where the rates we pay go back to service and not to profit. So lower utility bills, in net hospital beds rather than fewer hospitals or hospital beds. We can talk about reversing the cuts to Medicaid. Gary Palmer voted for Trump's Medicaid cuts, putting 48% of our rural hospitals at risk, and of course, increasing the burden on urban and suburban hospitals. We can talk about expanding Medicare to more people who have paid into the system between 26 and 65. We can talk about going further than that. We can talk about, we recently had a problem in Montgomery with the possibility of Jackson Hospital closing. I would love to, sit down and talk with Shamari Figures or whoever the next representative of Montgomery is and talk about, the hospital funding we get from the federal government, which was supposed to make up for some of the Medicaid cuts. But, we'll take what we can get. Third measurable goal. So I have a unique campaign promise, which is to only serve one term, one consecutive term, that is. And the reason I want to do it this way is because previously we had Gary Palmer promised to only serve 5 terms. It seems like he wanted to get away with thinking people would forget about that or not care as much after 10 years. Well, I want people to get the opportunity to see whether I'm for real after 2 years. And then after that, I can step aside and look around and see, whether I want to run again after those, I let someone else have a hack at it. I can back someone next election. But, third measurable result, I want people to, want me to break my promise. It sounds weird, but if I do a good job in that first term, I'm still going to fulfill my promise of not running for a second one. But people, if I've done a good job, then people will want me to run again,
I see.
And hopefully, some of the people who might possibly replace me will also be autistic and have ADHD and, not necessarily be people in white collar jobs or big business owners, because representation matters.
Very cool. So, shifting topics to education, Alabama is ranked very low nationally for our education. What do you see as the root cause of that?
Well, it seems that, out of touch Floridians like Tommy Tuberville would like you to think that the root problem is teachers being too lazy. I don't think so. I don't think that most people in District 6, many whom have sent their kids to our public schools, think so. I think the problem is that Alabama now and historically has neglected funding education. I would like to increase federal funding of education. And, I think honestly, a lot of the controversy that we have around, that topic doesn't really come from whether or not to fund education. It comes from mandates. And I believe in mandates, obviously, for special education and for preventing segregation, but I don't believe in necessarily federal or state legislature mandates around controlling curriculum, controlling libraries. We can just leave that to the administrators and the teachers who we hire to educate our children and run our libraries. Everyone can agree we want better schools. We want them more well-funded. That's why in places like Mountain Brook and Homewood and Vestavia, we consistently vote to fund our schools better.
Do you have any federal reforms that you would promote to help our education systems?
Yeah, mostly, again, I would like to assist the local schools with carrying out their mission of educating children and preparing them for life. So when schools want to do things like free breakfast or have transition programs for children who are in poverty or who are in special education programs, I want to provide funding for that. I support universal pre-K, which also goes into the childcare needs of working people and women. I support, lowering tuition, if not eliminating it, at state schools for in-state students and HBCUs for in-state students through federal money. Things like that.
Talking now about healthcare, you mentioned the rural hospitals that were at risk, and Alabama has been having some trouble with healthcare access across the state. What reforms would you prioritize to improve that across Alabama?
Yeah. So, longer term goal, I want to have universal health care. But immediately, I would want to propose a simple expansion of Medicare options for more people between 26 and 65 who have contributed to the system. Also, regarding children, we recently had an issue y'all may have heard about with a young woman named Juliana Barrientos in St. Clair County, who initially she was denied Medicaid treatment for out-of-state cancer funding for a rare form of cancer. In response to that, I've decided that I want to propose a bill that says that if you are a minor and you are on Medicaid or you are near the poverty level, that if you are seeking out-of-state treatment for cancer of any kind, then it should be funded by Medicare or HHS.
Great. I want to talk about funding because, I heard your universal healthcare point, and I think that universal healthcare could definitely benefit some of people in our nation. And then putting more money into schools also is definitely beneficial for our students. How do you plan on getting this federal funding?
Yeah. So that's a good question. One of the things I put on my website and in my platform when other people have posted it for me, like my friend Zach Henson, is the capital gains tax. Now, capital gains tax is an entirely separate income tax bracket where you are taxed at a lower rate for things like trading stocks, trading bonds, flipping houses. And the problem is that there's an entire class of people who are wealthier than a lot of us, but primarily make their money from that instead of what my parents do and what y'all's parents might do, of working 9-to-5 jobs, of working like salary jobs, or owning small businesses, and they pay lower taxes, and that's not fair. A lot these people, I think we should put Main Street first by raising the capital gains taxes and funding domestic programs. And I'm open to other conversations about cuts or taxes, but that's one of the things I put front and center is raising the capital gains taxes.
Interesting.
Okay, switching to another new topic. What is your stance on gun legislation, especially considering Alabama's strong gun culture?
Yeah, so I recognize there are a lot of people in central Alabama who own various types of firearms for various reasons. I was one of them. I had a .22 revolver that I like to take to Hoover Tactical Firearms to shoot for a while. I am not someone who is going to go to bat for criminalizing anyone's AR-15 or 9mm or pump shotgun. As with cannabis, what I want to see are reasonable regulations and taxes. So, for instance, you're not allowed to smoke. You're not allowed to buy tobacco anymore if you're under 21. I think if you're 21, this may sound a little bit crazy, but not if you're talking about the science of it, right? Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to buy a semi-automatic until you're 24 or 25, right? I also like the idea of putting like a new small excise tax on some of these guns and ammunition. It's not necessarily a hill I would die on, as they might say, but I like the idea of it, and part of that money could go to funding state, the ATF, so that they can assist states in funding and enforcing their reasonable gun measures. Now let's talk about the kinds of gun control I don't like. Hunter Biden was prosecuted under a federal law that says that if you're involved with drugs and you buy a gun or lie about it when you're buying a gun, then it's automatically a crime. The problem with that to me is that if you've ever bought a gun, you know this. There's no reasonable way that the average legitimate gun seller would know whether you're involved with drugs. So basically, in my mind, this is what's called a drug war mandatory minimum. It's a excuse for prosecutors to tack on more time to people who may just be low-level or nonviolent drug offenders. And based on what I know about those issues, I don't like that.
Interesting.
So wait, just drug offenders? You don't believe that they should?
Yeah. So it's a very, yeah. So if someone has been convicted of a felony already, and that's when you say you can't go out and buy a gun, I have no problem with that. I believe in universal background checks, by the way. So we should prevent everyone who's currently, prevented from buying a gun because of a felony or an adjudication from being able to buy a gun, right? But it's these specific laws that, like, Hunter Biden, for instance, was prosecuted under, and that there was a Supreme Court case where they actually limited the ability of prosecutors to prosecute it when it involved marijuana, where it's the issue of where it says if you do drugs, then you can't buy a gun. It's a useless law, basically, if your goal is to prevent people from buying guns. It's only useful if your goal is to give low-level and nonviolent drug offenders more time, and that's what it would actually do, and that's what it actually does in reality, and that's why I'm against it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, talking now about the affordability crisis, what do you see as something Congress can do to relieve the pressure off of struggling families and lower cost for
Yeah.
Americans?
Creating the Cahaba River Corporation, which would be the alternative to the Alabama power monopoly. That would help lower costs. I, as a worker and someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about, my reality as a worker, I think we should really attack affordability from the standpoint of wage and hour issues. For instance, so the original threshold for overtime was not supposed to be 40, according to Alabama Senator Hugo Black wanted it to be 30 hours. Now there's discussion about making it 32. So I would propose after 32 hours of work, you have to be paid time and a half. I'm for raising the minimum wage. We've talked about healthcare, lowering those costs. And by the way, even when you look at the government, right, even when you look at the issue of taxes, long-term universal healthcare where you get the insurance middleman out of it, we know from what's happened in other countries, not only do they have better results, but it costs taxpayers less because you've got the middleman out. So long-term solution on healthcare and immediate solution on healthcare, in my mind, with expanding our public resources for healthcare would help a lot with affordability. We can also talk about capping very specific drugs that don't really have an alternative. I'm sure there's more that I'd love to hear from other experts and lawmakers and candidates about.
Great. Okay, and moving on, this topic has been really prevalent in the media recently, immigration. What do you think that Congress could do differently about handling immigration?
So first of all, we need to understand that since the civil rights era, our country's official policy has moved towards a system that's supposed to be based on merit and economic needs rather than race or cultural anxiety. The executive branch is taking us backwards through banning black and brown people and targeting them, and then very specifically bringing in white South African refugees based on a racist conspiracy theory. I think that Congress needs to take back the power on that and put a stop to all of that. I think it's time to abolish ICE. You'll notice that before the mid-2000s, we didn't have ICE. And we still had a country. We know our communities. District 6 is a community of immigrants. It's a multilingual, multiracial, multinational of origin community. We know that no one and nowhere is safe. The only ice I need is on my chain or in my glass. We need to pass the DREAM Act. There are Alabamians who have there are people who are Alabamians in all but name. They were brought here by their parents, meaning they weren't culpable in the issue of them being undocumented to begin with. They follow the law. They don't have criminal records. I want to give them pathway to citizenship. I want to give state people without nationalities who happen to be in this country a pathway to citizenship and protections in the short term. That's a big issue that there's a lot of undereducation about is statelessness around the world. I encourage y'all and everyone listening to look it up with like the UN and the NGO data on that. I want here is a very issue where me and the Make America Great Again people agree in theory. I think that we should reform the temporary worker visas because it's for a long time, civil rights organizations have pointed out how these programs often put people in a place close to indentured servitude where they're exploited and they can't really do much when they get messed over by their bosses, and it sometimes becomes a pathway to people staying in the country without documented status. So I think we need to actually reform it. What specifically would that look like? I'm not sure. I think there would be some kind of compromise between giving the people who receive it these temporary visas more freedom, but also putting more restrictions on the sponsors, and maybe broadening who can take advantage of it, because a lot of the problems from the perspective of exploiting the workers who use it is that they can get kicked out so easily if they speak up or try to change their situation.
Okay, here's our last question, and it's my favorite question because it's kind of a challenge. It's a little bit of a thinker. But in one sentence, why should people vote for you?
People should vote for me because it's time for someone like me to challenge Gary Palmer.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was so interesting and fun.
Yeah, it was great to meet you.
Thanks.
And everyone watching, don't forget to vote in the special primaries on August 11th, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.